Hi, Matthew. We're very happy to be with you talking today, and also very grateful about all your collaboration with our new books festival. It's an honor for us, as I said to you before, and now I want to say it publicly. Your work has been a great inspiration for us since we started researching about nothingness a lot of years ago. So thanks very much to participate with us.
Thank you. It's great. No, it's fantastic, Felipe. I admire the work you've been doing all together over the years. And when this opportunity came up, I mean, there was no way to say no. It's fun. Sounds too excited to go ahead and do nothing together.
Exactly. Well, and we have lots of common friends and or people that are related to our work that have been collaborating with us along this year, such as our friend Paulo Pires Dovale, who came in the second version of the
Hmm.
festival. He he was really helpful, like helping us to consider an exhibition as a as something similar to writing an essay,
Hmm.
and that idea has been very important for us. And you have also related ideas about curating that we might talk about later in that sense.
Right.
Well, for people that maybe don't know you here in Chile, I just wanted to say that you have been a curator that has been working in a lot of different projects and also catalogs and books uh, related to conceptual art, but also dance, film, music, lots of different literature in different ways. So your approach has been very interdisciplinary, but
Hmm.
also very open to find new ways of disposing the different materials and opening new dialogues. And you have
Yeah.
had the chance to collaborate in lots of countries, also in Latin America,
Hmm.
and we're very happy to count with your help, specifically for this festival. For the
Yeah.
people that haven't gone yet to see our exhibitions these days, this festival has two shows. One of them
Yeah.
is mostly blank books, invisible books, and some objects that might be related to those ideas. Some all black books, even scenes from movies that show blank books. Different versions of 4 minutes 33 seconds by John Cage, etc. We have lots of materials in that exhibition at Gronefot Sala de Máquinas, and in the other exhibition at Campus Creativo at Universidad Andrés Bello, we have a special selection of blank posters that was made by you when we talked in March, I think. In London, you have this idea to collaborate with us, uh, calling some artists and asking them for posters that could be just printed here in Chile and display at that exhibition. So I'm very grateful for that help. All of us are very grateful, but also we're very happy and grateful as well that this was so easy. I mean, you work in a in an international circuit, and you know that these kinds of projects might take lots of years, money, rights, and uh, assurances, whatever. And I was so happy when you say that this was so easy that you can call some friends, send the files, and just do it. And we like very much that attitude. We are not professional curators. We are just teach literature, and and it's great to find that attitude to do the things with the mediums you have and just do it.
Yeah.
So thanks
I
very much.
agree. No, it's essential to me. I
Hmm.
think it's very essential to be able to think about ways of production which defy the expectation and the logistics, especially when, I mean, it's a small show, but it was, but one that matters to me a lot because when you came to London, I know you wanted to start with the past, but let's start with the present. When you came to London right away, and we have that love in common for the
Yeah.
void, for nothingness, and And it seems to me that it would be a fantastic opportunity to invite some artists to reflect to that, not to just have my words and experience in the past or your presentation of books, but also how artists themselves think of conveying this idea of blank. What is it empty? What is blank? And also, finding out that, and that's what I absolutely love with that that show that we did together, that exhibition of blank posters, is that none of them are blank, but they all address blankness somehow. They all address an absence. They all address nothing, but none of them are just a white sheet of paper on the wall. So I think that's for me that that really reflects upon an understanding of what curating can be. Really, it's just it can just be a printer in a space, and but the other thing that when you say we have numerous friends in common, I mean, one of them is, of course, Simon Morris from Information as Material, which, I mean, if I remember well, when you came to see me, you had just seen him. And given that now we teach together, I teach with
Yeah,
him at Leeds Beckett University, it has been fantastic to be able to exchange and also invite him to
yeah,
do that because, he was what I mean, what I'm reaching out with that is the premises of your proposition as well is to work with the university, and the university is a fantastic tool of production of knowledge most often, but also production in terms of producing art.
yeah.
And the first thing I asked you is, okay, what can we print? What's the size? What's the maximum size that is free at uni? If you tell me an A3, it would have been an A3 show. You had that fantastic, weird size by 120 by 60. I was like, wow, that's a challenge already. It's not standard. And I love that. So, it's about desire, love for the arts, but also loves of production and how we can make art happen. And also, I mean, luckily there's no insurance for nothingness.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, but there's a work that I really love by Derek Bellew, who sent a nothing box, a box filled with nothing, from Canada to England to the Bury Art Museum. And the first thing was that they tell you at the post office that he couldn't send nothing in a box. So he put a blank sheet of paper. And after that, they asked how much was the cost of that sheet. And he said, like, I don't know, like $10,000. So things like that. So that is funny. It's always interesting to see how money is also related to nothingness,
Oh,
especially
absolutely.
when you think about the commercial uses of works that deal with nothingness. That might be
Oh no,
very,
it's
very
essential. I mean, joke aside, is for instance one of Yves Klein, who did one of the first void in the history of art. Whenever you things that is not too known about that show is whenever the public was wanted to go and visit that show at the Galerie Iris Claire in 1958,
yeah,
you had to pay to enter.
yeah,
Because you had this assumption that people would by coming into the space and leaving the space would impregnate themselves with this immateriality and take it away from the space. So therefore, unless you had received by the post in the forms of the invitation a
yeah,
free pass or free entry, you had to pay. So from the onset, I think, especially in Yves Klein's case, but nothing has been nothing has a value.
yeah, exactly. And it also has a provocative or critical power to to put a name, to put a size, and to put a value to that nothingness. It's like
Absolutely.
deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. And that's the beauty and the paradox, It's
exactly.
yes, it'll be free to do a nothing show, and nonetheless, you have to have nothing, the absence of art or as works of art themselves. And to find them that so if most often took place in the realm of the museum, so
Mhm.
many took place in the realm of the gallery.
Okay.
And I love that, when the Lawrence Fund Gallery was left empty by Laurie Parsons, for instance, it is nonetheless an investment on the part of the gallery,
Yeah,
or Ramanandak in
Yeah.
2006 with JB Agency. JB Agency was left empty, and so therefore you have that, which is a gallery in Paris. And it takes a great skill of power of convincing, but also a great skill of engaging with the art and the radicality of art.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
not so many people are willing to do that. So
Mm.
yeah, you're right. I mean, it is, if we think value in its most wide open sense, it will be. And of course, even the show we've just done together has value. It has,
Yeah.
no commercial value, so to say, but loads of production values. And just that, if we try to, put it down on paper, becomes extremely valuable.
Yeah.
But, it's also, as a very dear friend of mine, Pablo Landelabarra,
Mm.
always talks about the economy of friendship. And I love that term.
Yeah.
It's all about
Yeah.
that. And
It's a
that
beautiful.
economy is invaluable.
Yeah. Well, after this start of the talk, I'm thinking about charging a fee for entering the our show. It was supposed to be free, but after this talk, we'll think it again. Well, I wanted to start like after this preamble that also shows some light of the things that we will talk. Um, what was your first interest in nothingness or works related with nothingness? Do you remember a specific artist or piece that like triggered that
Yeah,
interest?
no, very much so. But you might be extremely disappointed with my answer, though, because it all came from, in the 1990s with the early internet art. And I was absolutely fascinated with an idea of an art that is dematerialized from its materiality, so to say, the classical common materiality associated to art. Let's just be very classical in terms of painting or sculpture or bronze. And it was a very initial thought and conception for me about, okay, thinking about what is the materiality of art when it's not created for the internet. So we're talking net art, we're talking artists like Vukosi, we're talking about all this kind of philosophy, which and art making, which of course, I mean, right away we establish and assume that, well, it's not devoid of materiality. You gotta have a computer, you have to have the sources, and all the infrastructures that is behind, though. But nonetheless, though, you could not touch the art. You could not do the art was something that happened in the mind or in front of you. So this original of an idea really was it doesn't come just from there, but I remember vividly being absolutely in love with these thoughts. And that, on the parallel of that, sorry, that led me very fast to my first so to say, yeah, my first show, which was the a Perfect magazine,
Yeah.
which was a magazine printed with whiting on white paper, and for which I invited over 50 artists, about 50 artists to each contribute a piece, all knowing that it would be printed with whiting on white paper. And if some were obvious in the kind of a direction of travel that I wanted, it was beautiful. For instance, the late David Medalla, I remember him, so I absolutely adore him still. And asked me if he could, if for his page it could be a light silver on white
Really?
paper. To which I was so sad to say, I'm sorry, we can't. It's got to be nothing. It had to be empty. But also because, he was playing with this kind of appearance, immateriality, because of course, when you have it's a block of paper nonetheless, but it's not a block of white paper, because it's white ink. And that's also something that I loved right away, which was every nothingness, every blank, every void has a texture, a quality to it.
Mm.
But what happened when I worked on that show, and we're talking over 20 years ago now, that was printed with white ink on white paper, but because it's white ink, it has pigment, it has a quality to it, which will reflect, which will react, I beg your pardon, to the natural light, to the surrounding light in different ways. So for instance, if you were to put that magazine under a UV light, it's completely legible. So
Yeah.
therefore it was going into different ways. So I guess yeah, the origin was multiple. Also, just before that was also me meeting Gustav Metzger, who became a very influential mentor to me with his theory and of autodestructive art and the way that he developed. And I had the luxury and the pleasure and honor of accompanying him for the following 15, 20 years, until he sadly passed away in 2017. So, and of course, that theory of an autodestructive art, I think, also infused this notion of what is immateriality in art, what is the void, and how it is embedded within the art historical surrounding and field as defined by the likes of Lucy Lippard and so many others, great visionaries who really thought about it in so beautiful ways. It felt like it kept on evolving, though, and that's evolution that I was absolutely, and still to this day, fascinated by it. The fact that it's not that there's not one nothing, there's not one emptiness. Quite to the contrary, each of them have got a very specific, approaches, relations, realities. That is for me essential.
Yeah, in fact, when we were trying to find a title for this show, I said in joke that we should call it 50 Shades of White, because it's like, but it's this idea of like showing that there's no just one white, there are thousands of them. And I think that might be, if you tell us that you did this magazine just 20 years ago, and maybe at that beginning you didn't think that you will find so much nothingness works. I mean, it usually starts like, no, I have a few, and then it starts growing and growing and growing, and
yeah, I mean, as always, the way I work, though, it's I invited all these artists to each make a piece for them. There was only a few of specific work that I really wanted. I mean, one of them was Romano Palca. I was absolutely delighted that he would accept my invitation back in the days to have two photographs, because he had been taking that series of photographs as he was painting. His painting is becoming white on white, but the photographs remaining, what photographs are, given that they're portraits of himself aging as the process of painting continues. And so I was really excited about that. What happens then when the actual exhibition forces a kind of an outcome to the production of a series of photographs? That was something that I was extremely keen on exploring. And there was a couple of things like that. However, most often it was more, another one which was essential to me was to have the Ten Commandments of Gilbert and George, which I loved as a piece of writing, as a piece of art, as a challenge to society itself. And I was, excited to see it in that context. But then afterwards, to have the opportunity to work with so many artists to each, I remember when I had a long conversation at the beginning of the project with Lawrence Winner. And Lawrence was very much, I'm not quite sure I'm ready to have my work white on white, which I thought was beautiful in terms of, that's everything disappears, nothing lasts forever. And nonetheless, I love the fact that, yes, he accepted and made a piece for these pages of the magazine, and so forth and so on.
And how did that first work with the Perfect magazine led to a much bigger and important project such as Voids? We're talking about, for people that doesn't know, that this show of empty exhibitions at Centre Pompidou and also in other museums that also ended up in this amazing catalog, which is much more than a catalog. I mean, it's like an encyclopedia of nothingness, and at least for me, I was remembering that I think that I bought it just when it appeared. Maybe Amazon recommended it to me. I don't know. Sometimes the algorithm works well, and I remember like reading and taking so much notes of it because it expands in so many directions. But how that work started and
well, thank you. Well, I guess these premises that we talked about, in terms of my own interest in nothingness, absence, the void, was what I was happy and delighted to find out very very fast in that process was that I was not the only one to share that adoration and love to that. And among them was, as I've said, Gustav Metzger, who had been a really fantastic person and an artist, philosophers to think and talk with, and John Amleder. And so what happened was I was curating a show at the Contemporary Art Museum in Lyon called Soundtrack for an Exhibition back in 2006. And I organized I wanted to have a conversation between Gustav Metzger, John Amleder, and myself for that catalog, because it would offer an essential read and appreciation of something I was looking for with that very show, which and what became beautiful is that actually that conversation, which is in the book of the catalog of Soundtrack for an Exhibition, became the seeds for what was going to happen with The Void, because then we just find out a common ground for the three of us. You know, as I've said, me with my love and interest has crystallized in a Perfect magazine, that White on White magazine. But then another series of exhibition that I curated was called a spoken word exhibition, which is an exhibition of nothing else but spoken words. So there's nothing, so to say, is on the walls or in the space except for the materiality of the voice, which allude to a void and emptiness, whilst not being one, of course, but touches upon these thoughts. With Gustav Metzger, I mean, you know, that desire was clear and present, just as simply with a theory of an autodestructive art, an art that destroys itself in its process, which can happen from any time from 20 seconds to 20 minutes, or to, you know, this idea that it just, 20 years, sorry, 20 years. And this idea that everything just disappears. So alludes again to the void. And John Amleder during that talk was fast to recall one of the show that he had organized, which I absolutely loved. It turned out that he had the key to the contemporary art centers in Geneva. And one day, he just, one night rather, went to the space, took all the work down, repainted the space white, and once the paint was dry, re-put the works on the wall. And I absolutely love this idea of this invisible gesture, so to say. And so you see, so there was because of that common ground we all shared, we started meeting up, and John in return invited Mathieu to join us, and Gustav asked for Clive Philpott to join us, and the five of us, were stood to begin this curatorial committee of an exhibition that would be of nothing else but void, of empty exhibitions, which at first, voice retrospective of empty exhibitions. And then, we had the luxury of meeting every month in London to talk about it together, and me being the only curator in the gang, so to say, in the committee, I was tasked to really curate the idea, gather all the notes of our meetings, and take it from there, and really bring together that history that first of all came about in this idea of an exhibition, as you said, which was first took place in February of 2009 at the Centre Pompidou, and later that year at the Kunsthalle in Bern in September. But also because during these meetings, we just went off on so many beautiful and exciting tangents that we knew could never find themselves into this exhibition, rather, that, the idea of a catalog, more than a catalog, of a book really grew out. We knew right away that if there was going to be a catalog section to this exhibition, it also had to expand. And we had this desire to also create an anthology, so that would all reprint some historical texts, such as, of course, the fundamental Brian O'Doherty's, inside the White Cube sections, but also, some notes and researches, and commission so many of our friends, authors all over the place, that could really reflect upon this desire that was driving us. And then the third part, well, the fourth, but the third part was to invite all. What we had done right away when we were working on the show is we knew that for the knowledge we were looking for, the knowledge would rest with artists. So we all each decided to write to friends of ours and ask them about, for you, what would be the an artist would have done a void, and we had so many exciting and fantastic responses from exactly the artist pages at the end. So in turns, we invited all of these artists and more to each do a void for the catalog, to really literally to respond to this idea. So might there have been artists involved in the making of the book itself, in as much I'm thinking, for instance, the late Jacques Villeglé, who had been a very close ally and partner to Yves Klein back in the not as from the late 50s, early 60s till his death, unfortunately. But he was the one who organized the Salon Comparaison, into which Yves Klein did yet again another void. So it was important also to not only have his recollection in terms of art history, but also to give him the opportunity to actually tackle this idea of what would it be to make a work of art that deals with these notions, with these ideas, with these beliefs. And so I remember vividly Gustave invited Hermann Nietzsche, for instance, and that really grew up in such a beautiful manner to give us the as you've said, that very book. When the book came out, when we all arrived to Paris for the opening of the show, which, as you've said, consisted of nothing but a succession of 9 empty rooms, nothing else, no of the memorabilia, none of these beautiful posters or
exactly.
nothing whatsoever. All that is in the book and was always meant to be in the book. What we wanted ourselves is really to confront ourselves to nothingness, emptiness, this absence of as works of art. So, to really go there. But on the other hand, we made it so that the book came out also at the same time as the exhibition for the opening of the show. And Gustav had these fantastic words when he came out. There's a BC and a AC, playing with
Oh,
BC
yeah.
and AD, and meaning there's before catalog and after
Yeah,
catalog.
yeah,
I
exactly.
love that, because for him, really, this outstanding accumulation of knowledge was, if the experiential one was and always was meant to be the exhibition in itself, which was,
Yeah.
as we've said in the introduction to the catalog, that the radicality lies with the artist. But, for us to have had this fantastic opportunity to realize that show, first thanks to Laurent Lebon at the Centre Pompidou, and then thanks to Philippe Pirotte at the Kunsthalle Bern, where he was then director, it was a fantastic opportunity to experience the art, but to experience this accumulation of knowledge, which was going in all fantastic different ways. Might have been with this beautiful thinking of what is what is the void in architecture, for instance. So I remember doing a conversation with Claude Parent, which found itself in this section of the book, or to commission John Savage to do a text on punk, and within this idea of the void in punk music, so really covering as many ground as we could, and related
Mm.
or correlated voids and nothingness in so many different fields of thoughts and philosophies and arts and
Philosophy, mysticism. I mean, there's a lot of old stuff also, or I don't know, uh, Lewis Carroll's map. I mean, there's a lot of different things. It's a very intense and funny experience to just go through
oh
the
yeah.
book. Yeah,
Well, I'm glad you say that, because of course there's a great level of, I mean, even though the void is extremely serious, as we can
yeah, yeah,
think, it's also very funny and amusing, and there's a great sense of humor within that. That's what when I'm mentioning, for instance, the punk section, it's actually
yeah,
beautiful
exactly.
which is a series of titles of punk songs that all have to be with annihilation, destruction, which
Exactly.
you find that against society, and
Yeah,
nonetheless, though,
insults and jokes and all that. Yeah.
absolutely, the semiology, the semantics rather, being called within that realm is for me still essential. Or when you think about David Tup wrote a beautiful piece, and I'm glad that, to exactly the same way that all voices are different, all silences are different. And when, as you mentioned, you have in the show, that outstanding score by John Cage,
Yeah.
Formula 33, there's so many others ways of understanding the silence, or what silence means in terms of music. And so that's also something that I was thrilled that you have had the opportunity to, have that coming out.
Exactly. Something that is very interesting is that you mentioned Lucy Lippard, and I always recall when she says, I don't know the exact phrase, but one wonders how much nothingness is left, or how much space there's left for new nothingness. She
Yeah.
had this idea that they were going to a limit in the nothingness of the works at the end of the 60s. But it's very interesting because I think the history of art is full of those dead ends moments when you say, well, how much else can we do?
Absolutely.
There's this white page in a poem by Vasily Nedov, a Russian futurist, that is like the end of a road. You have also this idea in the 60s, because there's a moment that there's a lot of nothingness. I think in Dadaism, also Russian futurism, then in the conceptual art, Fluxus, of course, you mentioned Yves Klein, of course, Ben Baudelaire, Manzoni, and others are also related to nothingness.
Yeah.
Gustav Metzger. And it seems that in the 2000s there was like a revival of nothingness, or a new generation trying to deal mostly from a post-conceptual view, but maybe from other perspective, trying to come back
Yeah.
again to nothingness.
But it seems to me from the history of the void, for instance, that there was never a break. And
No.
that's what I, so therefore it was not a post-conceptual revival, quite to the contrary. It
Mm.
seems to me that actually, we start at the height of modernism with Yves Klein, and then within 6 years, then well, 8 years, in 1966, we have art and language,
Exactly.
defining this idea of the air conditioning show, which is, and what is that but the premises of the critique of the institutional critique, though.
Mm.
So what is interesting about that is that how it carries through and forth within so many different and radical fields, and but also it never stops. Let's say in the late 1980s, you're gonna have Bethan Hughes, confronting herself with the House Esther's in Krefeld, and realizing that she cannot do anything. That beautiful building by Mies van der Rohe was such that the art was already there. There was nothing else to add, and thus decided to have nothing in the show, nothing as the show. And but then a couple of years later, few years later, you would have Maurizio Catalan,
Yeah, yeah.
or but it's not exactly a void, but with actions touching on the void.
Exactly.
If we want to be
Or
stricto
refusing
sensu,
to produce work or things like
if
that.
we
Yeah.
want to be stricto sensu with the void, then we have then artists, like one of my heroine, my icon, who would then do that show at the house at the Kunsthalle in Bern, and then realize, okay, well, the building is in such a poor state that I want to reinvest in the entire budget of the show in the refurbishment of the gallery, or at least some kind or some parts of it, but the gallery will have to remain empty de facto. But what you touched, so therefore, what I'm trying to say about that is that I don't think there was ever a break. Maybe there was a resurgence in interest in that, but as for the artists and
Yeah,
where they can,
exactly. Maybe
it
the change
always
of the context may make those kind of works more meaningful in some periods over other, or
more meaningful. I think meaningful again, maybe.
yeah.
But on the other hand, though, I mean, it's yeah, no, it is quite interesting, but it touches upon one of the sentences which have always been essential to me by Ben Vautier, what are the limits of art?
Mm.
And when you think about that, it's absolutely outstanding that we think we touched them, we cannot go any further, and then we'll become an artist who will do that thing that just feels like, oh, as Carl Andre once said, that can be art too.
Yeah.
Oh, we just realized the this implication, this
Mm.
the fact that it just goes beyond, and it can go beyond. It's just about context. It's, for instance, I absolutely love talking with so let's shift slightly, within this realm of
Mm.
the void, and leaning to this idea that maybe to do a retrospective of empty exhibition is akin to do an anti-exhibition in so
Yeah,
many ways, when classical sense of what an exhibition is accepted to be as. When I was working on the anti-museum, that the
yeah.
book that
I
came
just
out.
wanted to mention it because we're going in that direction. So
Yes,
this is the cover, which is very important. The
good.
image of that cover, and you have here the title, the anti-museum. This is also a huge project that you work with other people to produce some years ago.
Yeah, I curated that show at the Kunsthalle in Fribourg in Switzerland, and which was the show itself actually was called a retrospective of closed exhibition, because as I was working on the void, I just found out so many shows which were connected to the research we were carrying, but which did not fit the bill, but nonetheless had this kind of a similarity of intent of
Yeah,
which was the radicality, which was this idea of what it is not to show, or what it is when you get given the opportunity of your very first exhibitions in a gallery, for instance, as with Daniel Buren and years later Maurizio Cattelan, and both decided to close the space, for the first show, which is a beautiful radical gestures when you think about it. But also what's fantastic is, they're kind of how one alludes to the other, and nonetheless, one is radically different to the other.
yeah,
And these are another series of understanding of what works of art can be, and what I care a lot too, what exhibitions can be, what it is to
exactly.
decide that an exhibition will be entirely empty, what is it to decide that the exhibition will be closed, so therefore the institutions will be closed. What are these implications? What does it mean? What does it offer to the entire structure that that makes the exhibition possible, that makes this artwork possible? I think the ramification becomes endless and beautiful, in as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly, because one of the things that uh, has interested me a lot studying blank books or invisible books is something that Annette Gilbert, who also was invited some years ago here to our first festival, talks about. She says that when you took the physical object, you reveal all the structure that makes it possible. And you could say, of course, the same about the exhibitions or whatever kind of work.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And and then we also have to go to some of the I was gonna say, I don't know, this is definitely, godfather, grandfather, or what
Yeah,
have you. But let's leave the patriarchy aside, though, and just think
yeah,
transnationalities, though. And let's think about Robert Barry, for instance, who would do the Marcus piece, which implied to leave the gallery empty at the turn of the 70s, and then a couple of years before, though, would have done the closed gallery piece,
yeah.
which was to close the gallery as a work of art. And all of these gestures, I beg your pardon, are absolutely essential to me, and to find an artist reaching these two limits of art, but each time through a different understanding of what leads him to do that. I love to talk with Robert first and foremost about this idea of the closed gallery piece, let's say. And for him, which is both this desire to, in his words, to use the gallery as a medium. It is something to work with, and it reveals the entire infrastructures that surrounds it. Of course, it doesn't come from nowhere. He had done just previously the invitation piece, which revealed
Yeah.
one invitation after the other for a whole season, as
Mm.
we would take it in fashion. But then when he also does the empty gallery piece, which was never called an empty gallery, but it's about delimiting a space into which one is going to go and think. And
Exactly.
just to think is, nothing else but the space to be in. And I love that he would reach these two limits of art whilst not deliberately seeking for these. But they are nonetheless de facto incarnations of what these are. Another one which is essential to me is Graziella Carnevale, whom again I was so happy that we could invite her for that show in your in the festival right now. But when in 1968 she decides to have the show at the gallery, that the Ciclo de Arte Experimental in Rosario in Argentina, the audience survives, and she locks the audience inside. So
really
therefore, what
important
do we have? What?
in in American, Latin American conceptual art. That's a really really important piece. I mean, it's
Oh
uh,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
for me, it's
yeah,
one of these
really
that
important. Yeah,
touches the limits of art, And what's beautiful about it, it's about the void, it's about closure, it's about radicality, it's about
yeah,
politics, about activism.
excellent. Yeah,
So it's about,
mm,
first and foremost, about art,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's, but art in a context, art that addresses the context,
Totally.
art that tries to redress a context. As we all know, the political situation was untenable back then. And as she told me in an interview, she found it unbearable that museums and galleries were still active, or, pretending that we can make art in that moment. So how can we make art that reflects that moment? And I think that piece has, for me, you know, been ever so essential, but it was not a conceptual gesture. It was gesture.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's the beauty of it is to realize the piece.
Yeah, and also something that is very interesting, that it goes against that idea of nothingness or silence as escapism, or I don't know, at trying to forget everyone and just uh, this is not kind of like a new age meditation piece. Of course, there are some works that are very metaphysical or even religious related to nothingness, but in this case, it's totally the opposite. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, and
absolutely.
I wanted to know related to the anti museum and voice and all your other exhibitions with with sounds, with the voice, or with other materials. Um, how has the fact of working with sometimes nothingness works, or other works that are very difficult to grasp or to, I don't know, to hang on a wall, uh, have influence in your view as a curator? Because of course it's different to curate I don't know, a show about Renaissance paintings, which can be really marvelous, of course, but it's different to curate that kind of works that to curate nothingness works.
I
How
would
has
argue, well,
it evolved?
is it though?
Sorry,
I would argue, is it really though?
I
It's
don't know.
no, no, I think the question is absolutely fascinating. It's because it touches on the materiality. What's beautiful, for instance, when you do an exhibition such as a Voice Retrospective, or that you have the exhibition which is of the same materiality as the works of art that you present. And that's the beauty of that. That's something I'd experienced, for instance, with a spoken word exhibition as well,
Yeah,
which is the exhibition itself is of nothing else but spoken word, words spoken, and the artworks are to be spoken to be. So therefore, you have this kind of coming together of the same materiality, which for me is essential understanding and acceptation of maybe the radical stance needed to accept the plurality of what exhibitions can be. Now, they also present a challenge, and that's the
yeah,
challenge that I love. One of the things that I found, for instance, especially for Void, that was essential to me then, I realized that in order for it not to be taken as an attack, I had to be there during the entire show. So I stayed in Paris then during the entire show and went to the museum every day, did some impromptu tours, visits, to really accompany the audience with the show. Not to say that the show was standalone, that it didn't need me, but I
mm,
really wanted to make sure that we would accept the fact that yes, it is a challenging show, but it's not a confrontation. Quite the contrary, it's an invitation for acceptation,
yeah,
and that was something essential to me. But again, as you've said, it all plays within this idea that we got to accept what a exhibitions can be. When doing the retrospective of closed exhibition at the Kunsthalle in Fribourg meant that the museum was going to be closed, the Contemporary Center was going to be closed for 3.5 months. And then, de facto, because
yeah.
and it was not closing the
No, no,
rooms,
no.
it's about closing the entire institution, one after the incarnating, one after the other, all the closures that in a history of art that we could find and gather in terms of and of course working with the artists to make sure that how we can restage a work like that, how most often, there's no way to restage. We got to think again or do a new one. It's very interesting what it means to do that and how we can expand upon that.
Uh, I was thinking also about what you're saying, that show seems like a pandemic show avant la lettre when all the museums were closed.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny and tragic to think like that. And well,
Tragic indeed. No, but because after the after the retrospective closed exhibition came the anti-museum, which was really an acceptation, okay, to think that if the retrospective of closed exhibition can be understood as an anti-exhibition, then what would be the idea of anti-art, anti-architecture, anti-music, anti-culture in general, and thinking this under the umbrella of the anti-museum.
yeah,
But then, after the pandemic, well, during the pandemic, first and foremost, it became a tool for many institutions across the world, really trying to understand how artists in the past have worked once the gallery is closed or have closed the gallery as a work of art. What does it mean? What are the implications to do that? What is the philosophical meaning, the ecological fact,
yeah.
the economical facts, and so therefore, when I was invited a few years later by Reiko Setsuda at the Hermes Foundation at the Forum in Tokyo to do an exhibition, which happened at the height of the pandemic, unfortunately, we also decided to make a film
Mm,
about the anti-museum because it became, let's say, the relevance came anew, or a relevance became new, and so therefore it was extremely interesting to find out how the history, you know, could tell us about the present and how the present can be accepted in terms of the future
mm,
of a model for art, a future for exhibition, a
mm,
future for museums, and that's what became the anti-museum and anti-documentary.
mm,
So yes, indeed, yeah, there are all of these subsequent layers
mm,
which the pandemic revealed,
mm,
and which also makes us realize that the limits of art sometimes can go far beyond us.
mm. Yeah. Now that I would like to talk a little about our own show,
Yes.
uh, your part of this festival, your selection of posters, and that idea that came from our conversation some months ago. Um, the first thing that I really liked when we talk about and we discuss how to send the materials and all that, and you say no, I can just send the files and you print them and all that. It was a very nice gesture, not only in general but also in particular. Our shows, all of our book festivals, have always been very linked to the figure of a very important visual poet and post-mail artist from Chile, Guillermo Deisler, who died in 1995. Because since the first of our festivals, we have been working with his archive, and we have had the chance to be in touch with his widow and to talk a lot about how he worked and how he received all the materials and organized that beautiful magazine universe, etc. So just when you told about that way of working, we were happy because it was like the same as our own hero here in Chile, Guillermo Deisler. So thanks for that also, because
Thank you.
that's a very beautiful link. This idea that we were talking before, like making art just what would have you have at hand, with mediums, with no money, whatever, just to do it for because you like to do it, because you find it important. That was, I think, the spirit of Guillermo
Oh,
Deisler.
absolutely. No, absolutely. For me, it was essential. That's why I was so happy when we had that talk and that you would accept to do that. You know, as you've said, with no economy, with no nothing. And first and foremost, I have to thank all the artists who accepted this invitation to take part and who responded so fast in the making of these posters. Because, you know, as ever, there's no exhibition with artworks, and of course, no, we need the artists for that. And I'm so grateful to them. I'm so, you know, I absolutely cherish that ongoing relationship and conversation, which was one of the first artists I invited was John Amleder, you know,
Yeah.
to continue that conversation we had with the Void, of course, and continuous conversations between us. And, you know, and I absolutely love his poster, which is not only he chose the wrong side, so to say, because it's beautiful, but then he say, oh, et puis non, oh, and no. And I love that because it's about everything. It's yeah, there's nothing in this piece, and yet it encapsulates everything as ever, as often. You know, Liam Gillick has been in my mind so much for the past few years, and his philosophy, our conversation have been essential to me, especially when I was working on the exhibition of a film. I wanted to really develop some thoughts and you know but we had not corresponded for a few years, but when came my desire to do that show, you know, he was one of the first artists I really wanted to reach out, you know, and again, what I love with his precisions, you know, with his mind that encapsulate everything with zeros and ones, and nonetheless,
Yeah.
which is so beautiful and poetic, you know, and also very designed. And I love this idea of designing nothing, designing the
Yeah.
void. You know, when I reached out to another old friend, Olivier Mosse, it was essential for me to have this opportunity. And he said, well, how can I respond to nothing? And he said, well, here is a poster that I often look at in my studio in Tucson where he lives. And he just snapped it and sent it and said, right, do something with that. Here's my contribution to that. And I
Uh,
love that because he had
I
nothing to do with the brief.
yeah. I'd like to show some of the images
Yes, please.
you want. Here is Robert Barry's.
Yeah. So Robert has, for the past quite recently, has been starting to work again with words of the same colors,
Yeah.
when painting words with the same colors, the backgrounds which he's painting them. And when I went to see him a couple of weeks ago in New York, I was just fascinated. I found them so beautiful. You know, it's fitting in our ongoing conversation, having just curated two perspective of his art and preparing a major monograph publication on his work, on his life at the moment. And so I really wanted to invite him to be part of that of that beautiful exhibition again. And I was so thrilled he would have accepted. And I love the fact that, you know, seeking to have of a fragment of a difference between the words to the background just gives
Exactly.
us this you know, no, it's not blank, but it eludes the blank. And anyway,
Like they're
artists are
moving to out of the center, like they are leaving the page in. It gives
absolutely.
that idea, yeah. And also, let's see what else. Um, well, here is
Yeah, Graciela Carnevale. So I just was invited to do a show in an exhibition, I beg your pardon, at the Galerie UCO, the University Gallery of the Université du Québec Ouatet in Canada, just outside of Ottawa, by Marie-Hélène Leblanc. And it had been a fantastic adventure. We've been talking about that show for years. And when it came, it was last October. And this October passed, you know, a couple of weeks ago. And I had invited Graciela Carnevale to contribute to this exhibition, which was dealing with this idea of the anti-museum again, trying to think about how we can make an exhibition of the anti-museum, so to say. And she wrote that most beautiful her own explanation of what art is to her, which
mm,
I think is pretty much what is art is to me or to so many of us. You know, it's a statement, it's a manifesto in itself. So when working on this idea of this posters exhibition for us, I proposed to Graziella if she would accept this idea of writing once more these definitions, you know, these statements of facts and art for us, which encapsulate nothing and everything all at once, and how the collective, the ecology, these are all what we got to think about. And somehow, even just a very humble show like the one we just did, encapsulate that. Yes, no, the carbon footprint is next to zero. There's no transport, there's no, yes, there's paper printed, but it can be recycled, and with a bit of luck, it raises awareness. So it cancels itself like that in terms of productions. So I wanted to have this kind of facts. And so I was so happy that Graziella would accept, and in her own beautiful handwriting writes that with, again, with that weird format that you gave me as a rule. And I said, you know what, that's the rule. We follow the rule.
Yeah.
And I find it, and so again, I'm so grateful to Graziella Carnevale for that, for her art, for her mind, for her philosophy, and what she offers again. And I hope this will become a statement that everybody passing into that corridor gallery at the university will really be infused by.
And this text specifically is very special in our own political context. You know what just happened in Argentina, in Chile. We have a plebiscite in 2 weeks for a new constitution, but that might be a constitution that's even worse than the one we already have. We are specialists in making things worse, but. That new constitution is a very neoliberal constitution, very individualistic constitution, and it's kind of in the same way that the project that the new president for Argentina is offering. So it is very individualistic times. To have a text like this is really, I mean, it's really meaningful. I was very happy and emotional when I read it. I mean, to read it in this context now in Chile or Argentina, well, or elsewhere, of course, it's really beautiful.
And I'm glad you say that, because as ever, it's about the visionary quality of the artists and how they will, with their proposition, will see and encapsulate our present, and in order to reveal so often our future. And I'm glad you say that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to finish.
I mean, we have to mention Florence Young's beautiful piece as well, which is an invitation for you to reach out to the artist. Or we have to mention Eva Bartok +1, an invitation on the guest list that does not exist. And
yeah, those are the funny nothingness that we can have.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's, yes, it is funny, it is amusing, it is beautiful, it is how would I say that? It encapsulates everything, maybe that's just as simply as that. Yeah. And
by the way, Matthew, it seems that your camera is shut down, or yeah.
There was nothing.
Yeah. I thought that was your performance.
I have no idea what happened. No, as I was
taking
talking,
it literally.
the laptop, you just switch everything off. Oh, I'm so terrible.
That's great.
I feel terrible now.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
No, I think that the whole selection of posters is able to display that very wide range of nuances that nothingness have. So in the case of Simon Morris, for example, it's like a little visual essay relating to Lawrence Stearns, one of our favorite writers, and also to Eugen Gombringer, who is
especially Constellation, the saturations of the concrete poetry, I think was essential. And I was delighted again how, in his own words, he sees his existing materials and and information being the material to make art. I thought that was absolutely beautiful, and I was so thrilled he would accept this invitation. That's elemental. And touching about all the elements. Or Peter Dansborough and his most beautiful piece, Nada, coming off. So literally taking the word of nothingness and making it happen. Or, having the honor again to work with Kay Rosen, this fantastic artist of the words, word artist, conceptualist, who since the 1960s has been challenging our ways of reading and making art, and for that, the pieces that she makes, writing 4 times 0 or 4 times nothing, and the nothingness being ever so visual and visible. I was, against such a beautiful work of art.
Well, we're really, really happy and grateful with you, Matthew. Sorry for being so repetitive with it, but it's
Well,
what
I am the
we
one
do.
thankful.
And yeah, for us, it's an honor to collaborate with you and also to expand the work that we're doing here with and putting it in relationship with everything that's going on elsewhere. So thanks again very much. And I don't know, do you want to say something for the people that visit the show?
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, welcome
And
and
and a
thank you for
spoken
coming.
curatorial text if you want.
Yes, indeed. But also, what's beautiful that we've not mentioned is this idea that these are posters, and I
Yeah,
really hope you will print the extras and lay them out in the street,
yeah,
because that's also about that, the dissemination of art.
yeah,
And all our friends. Yes, of course, we're gonna snap it and share it on the Instagram, but how
yeah,
beautiful you have this element coming outside of the realms of our common, you know, that established path, but you find them across our path as we walk along. I think that's beautiful. So that's why I'm very grateful. It's once again a beautiful opportunity to confront ourselves with nothing, with the void, with all these notions of nadas.
yeah,
And I'm just so grateful to you for this invitation and to have this opportunity to do that. And I'm thankful to all the artists who've accepted that challenge.
yeah. Thanks
And
to
now
all
the
of them.
challenge is yours. Now
Yeah.
the challenge is yours.
Well, thanks very much, Matthew, and I will keep you posted about how everything goes. This
Thank
interview should be online in a few days, so I hope lots of people can see it and also to take notes, find new names to visit, to view and appreciate. Thanks very
you.
much.
Thank you, my dear. Goodbye.